You're listening to the Healthy Creative Ministry podcast with Matt Curtis. This is the podcast that helps you take your creative ministry from wherever you are today to healthy and effective.
How do I know if I'm doing a good job? This is definitely on the heels of Easter. We just had a major event. We just invested a ton of time, a ton of energy. We're exhausted. And now we start thinking to ourselves, am I even doing a good job? How do I know if I'm doing a good job? I want to do this episode a little bit differently. I want to tell you a story about when I started managing online ministry. I had been watching this space for quite some time before we pulled the trigger on it as an organization. Generally speaking, the organization was pretty resistant to the idea. Now on the other side of COVID, it looks like, well, yeah, of course you got to have something, but that was not the case pre-COVID, not by a long shot. And so there were many years where I saw the potential of something like this. And part of it is I lived it personally. My wife has some chronic health challenges. And so what that means is that going to church every weekend isn't really feasible for her. And so what that meant was you completely unplug from the community of believers that you're a part of, and you don't participate in anything. Or if online ministry is an option, now all of a sudden you have the ability to invest and be connected to the body of believers in some way. And so I saw online ministry as a really potentially powerful and compelling ministry opportunity for those who struggled like my wife does. So for me, this wasn't just technology's really neat and cool. This was a legitimate opportunity for churches to be leaning into because technology facilitated this or allowed this in a way that it hadn't in the past. So I had been advocating for this for a really long time, and eventually we decided as an organization, you know what, we're going to do it. And so me and one pastor were partnered up on this, and it became our ministry to launch. And so we did. And so in 2018, I remember it was Christmas Eve services of 2018, we launched our online ministry. We ran it for about a year, and in November of 2019, we ran a survey to get a sense of what was going on. How was this helping people? Was it helping people? What were the theories that we thought people would be, engaging with this because of? Like, did we think that this was the way that they check out our church the first time? Do we think that this is a personal invite thing? What exactly is it that's motivating people to engage with us? And we found out a lot of really interesting information. But what I found particularly compelling was that all of the work that we put in, none of it was called out overtly in this survey. No one said, I appreciate the uptime. No one said, I appreciate that you switched streaming providers from one to another. No one said, I really appreciate that we can stream in high def via YouTube or via the app that's got a Roku player app and an Apple TV app. No, nobody talked about my investment. Nobody talked about the pastor that I was working with, his investment. Instead, all we heard about was God at work. To connect the dots here, this question of how do I know if I'm doing a good job? You're not always going to know if you're doing a good job because you're typically going to be looking for validation in terms of, am I doing a good job? You're looking for validation through something that you're doing. You want to know, is my input connected to some output? And so you have to be really careful with this in the space of ministry. I actually think that this is one of the things that gets us into trouble. A lot of the output in ministry isn't actually a credit to us. It's a credit to God working. And what that boils down to is that our input, our effort, doesn't have a cause connection to the output. An example of this would be baptisms. If a church says we want to have more baptisms, well, you're not going to be able to do that by just forcing it. If a church says we want to have more salvations, more people accepting Christ, I mean, it's a great ambition, it's a great goal, but at the end of the day, we don't think that salvation is something that we're responsible for, do we? I don't. I believe that that is a work that God does. So there's only so much that you can do. Now, if you're never presenting the gospel, you can adjust that. If you're not taking opportunities to, be present in the community amongst people who are non-believers. I mean, of course, those are practical things that we can do in order to put ourselves in a position where we're presenting the message of the gospel to people who don't know the gospel. Like, it makes sense that would be important, right? If all we're doing is talking to Christians, well, we're probably not going to have a lot of people coming to know Christ. That just doesn't make sense. That's not how that works. So there is an input side that matters from us, but ultimately what we're looking for is we're looking for validation that just doesn't come in ministry, because the validation that we want to see God at work. So I want to share just a couple of the survey results, some of the comments that were shared in this survey that we conducted for the people who are participating in our online ministry, because these matter more than, wow, good job having minimum latency on a stream. And so I'm kind of going about this, answering this question in a roundabout way, because I really want you to see how problematic it can be for us if our worth or even our validation is coming from something, or we're hoping it comes as a direct result of our work. Ministry doesn't go that way. So here's some things that we heard. My kids can get sick a lot, and instead of missing church all the time, I can now take a moment and still engage with my home church, get into the Word and worship, even when our family is sick. That's pretty cool. It helps me feel as if I'm not forgotten, and I'm very much a member of the church family. My kids can also see that there's no excuse to miss, and that we want to be intentional about attending church together, whether it's physically or online as needed. That's really powerful. What's happening here is this person is using our online ministry as a mechanism to teach her family or his family, I don't actually know. They're teaching their family the value of participating regularly in church. Now, they have some abnormal challenges. Their kids can get sick a lot, so they're not able to attend reliably. But they're able to build some really important and valuable foundational principles for their kids in terms of the importance of church. That's incredible. Now, that's not a direct result of anything I was doing. That's a direct result of God working. Another one here. I've battled cancer, and the online ministry kept our family connected to church. It's been a huge blessing for us. That's amazing. That's an incredible thing that just existing has been a way for this family, amidst a really difficult season of cancer, to be able to stay connected to their church. That's a really powerful thing. Here's another one. When my dad was battling cancer and in and out of the hospital, we would log onto the TV at the hospital and watch. It was a truly encouraging and uplifting moment during a difficult time. My parents had also been attending in person for years before my dad got sick. Then, because of his illness, they couldn't attend in person anymore. The online ministry gave them the ability to watch and be a part of it and still feel connected. These are really incredible things that God was doing through the work that we were doing. Now, were we involved? Of course we were involved. Were we investing? Of course we were investing. Were we working hard? Absolutely we were working hard. I was always trying to figure out new ways to make this community be more of what I believed it should be, what God has called the church to be. And so that for me is my role of it. My role is to continue to be faithful, to continue to be intentional, and to continue to try to get better. But God is the one who's doing the spiritual work that's happening here. And so I want to encourage you with this. I don't know if you're wrestling with the post-Easter lull like I am, but I was struggling to even record this episode. I'll often record episodes after I drop my son off at youth group on Sundays, and it gives me just enough time to record and edit. I like to be further ahead, but this week I happen to not be, just because there's so much going on leading into Easter that this was one of the things that, getting ahead was one of the things that I had to punt from my list. But what is it that we're feeling this week? I know for me, I would often wrestle, and often I still do at times, I wrestle with, am I even doing a good job here? And so that's a part of why I wanted to kind of lean into that this week. As the Easter lull is kind of upon us, we're looking ahead and we think, man, we got Summer's coming. It's kind of close. It's not quite where we want it to be. We'd like it to be here sooner. Maybe you have a vacation planned. I know for us, the weather is spectacular today. I want to just like take a nap on the back patio or something. So there's a lot of things that I think are contributing to this, not just the Easter lull, but that's a part of it. But it's good for us to be evaluating. Are we doing a good job? And it's good for us to be questioning these things. But it is equally important for us to remember that the work of ministry is really, the fruit of ministry is really the work that God's doing. So just a brief kind of summation here that I hope can be helpful for you this week. What are the things that you can control? You can control what you invest. Now, when I say that, there's a little bit of a caveat. If you're not feeling well, you can't control that. If you're not at 100%, you can't control that. But within those parameters, you can control what you're giving. You can control if you're going to cut as many corners as possible, or if you're going to do the due diligence to make sure you're doing good work. Those are the kinds of things. You can control the character of your work, we'll put it that way. The integrity of your work, the caliber of your work. You can control that, what you give to the work that you're doing. You can also control what you're working to get better at. Are you looking for opportunities to grow and to get better? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that you who are listening to this podcast are invested more than most. I know that all of the people that I have talked to about anything, whether it be one of the free resources on the website, whether it be a general question that somebody emails me about, which, by the way, if you ever have questions, please don't hesitate to email me. Yes, I have a business, but that doesn't mean that every conversation has a paywall. It means that if we're going to do some deep restorative work or some consulting work, or you need design help or something, sure, then there's a financial element. But if you have questions about how to be successful in creative ministry, please don't hesitate to ask. I've been in the trenches in seasons where I wish I had somebody to ping, a question off of. Don't hesitate. Shoot me an email, matt@lunchtimeheroes.co. That's how you get a hold of me. So, I mean, I would love to hear from you and I'd love to be helpful. But if you're listening to this podcast, you're already pursuing getting better at what you do. That's fantastic. Keep doing it. Keep going that direction. One simple way to kind of understand these different areas, the 4 creative cores. You can go to healthychurchcreatives.com. I'll put the link in the show notes. You can take an assessment and you can assess your health as a department, as a team, as an individual. How are you doing in your creative ministry? It breaks it down into 4 different areas. I call them the 4 creative cores: systems, skills, imagination, and heart. I'll also put a link in the show notes that sends you to a page that really unpacks the 4 creative cores. The reason I like these as a breakdown of things is because it lets you know where to invest. So we've already established you care about your job. You care about investing and getting better and serving your ministry more effectively. Love it. Keep doing that. But sometimes we don't know the right place to start. We don't know the right, where do we begin? The 4 creative cores will help you identify the right place. And then you may be in a position where you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Great. The Healthy Communications Ministry Blueprint, do it. Figure out a way. I actually just recently changed the price so that it can be financed now over 5 months. And so if that's an easier way to jump in, fantastic, do it. But you have all of these tools. And hear this too. I don't care if it's my resource or not. Use somebody else's resource. Find some other class or program or system. I didn't find what I was looking for when it comes to building a course like I built. And so that's why I built it. If you don't need that or you want something different, fantastic. But you can control what you are investing in when it comes to your growth. That's what you can control. So how do I know if I'm doing a good job? Where are you investing your energy and your time? Do you find yourself cutting corners all the time? Do you find yourself looking for opportunities to get better? If you're in a season right now where you're overloaded and there's things going on that are just submarining you, whether they be at work or outside of work, great. Hit pause on the growth stuff. Just focus on getting by. There are plenty of seasons for me where I just couldn't invest at the level where I wanted to, but that's because I had other things going on. Don't feel like you have to burn the candle at both ends. You don't. That's what you can control, what you're investing, how you're growing. But what you can't control is what God decides to do with your investment. That's not up to you. I've been going back to the book of Jeremiah fairly often over the last couple months. I was actually attempting to read it all the way through, and I struggled so much because it's just a heavy book. But one of the things that's so interesting to me about Jeremiah is that he was faithful with his input, right? He was faithful with what he did, the way he responded to God's call. He was obedient. God said, hey, go tell these people this stuff. And he said, okay, I will. And he did. Well, but what he didn't get is he didn't get a result. So by our standards, we would say, well, yeah, Jeremiah was a failure. He didn't get these kings to turn it around. He didn't get these leaders to change or to obey what God had called them to or had instructed them to be doing. Okay, well, he's not a failure. That's just our read of it. That's just our, interpretation based on the way that we view success and failure in our context. Obedience to God is the measure of faithfulness. And so when it comes to ministry and the work that we're doing, we don't get to control what God does. We don't get to control what he does with our investment, but we do get to control whether or not we're faithful. Now that we've come off of Easter and we look ahead, there are a couple things coming, but really we have a good amount of margin between where we are today and where we are going to feel pressure. The first thing that kind of jumps to my mind is a fall launch. There's often a big surge when it comes to that, but the fall is far away. We still got summer. We haven't even started. We're in the thick of spring here, but we're just not at that point yet where we feel that pressure from fall yet. But I would encourage you to use this time productively. If you're part of the email list, you got an email this week, and it was really an encouragement to be more proactive about getting up and initiating conversations with ministry leaders. So we're not just sitting on our hands and waiting for them to come to us. That's a very similar idea here. That's something you can control. You can control your proactivity. But I want to encourage you to be really thoughtful about the fact that God is the one who does the ministry work in your ministry. God is the one who decides what to do with your investment. So ultimately, my charge to you is this: be faithful and watch what God does. And that's how I would answer the question, how do I know if I'm doing a good job?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Healthy Creative Ministry Podcast. This podcast is just one of the ways Lunchtime Heroes can help you build a healthy creative ministry in your church. Stay up to date on the latest by signing up for the Creative Bites email at lunchtimeheroes.co.